Alright, so for those who haven't competed before, I thought I would make this video covering this one specific topic, although granted this will not be a long video, but I think it's important enough to flag and useful enough when it comes to the time that it did deserve its own video. So what I'm talking about is how to know when to communicate with your coach when things are getting hard. And the reason I bring this up is because when you're getting ready for a show and everybody's told you how difficult prep is and how much you can potentially struggle on prep, essentially it builds this anticipation for when it's going to get hard that you kind of expect it, and you're essentially fed the idea that it should be difficult and you have to just get on with it. And to some degree, this is true. And it is a challenge, and you do have to be prepared to work hard and push through periods of time where you're tired and everything like this. But the thing that I want to stress, and I can't stress this enough, is there's a point where fatigue is riding too high, you're too flat, strength is plummeting too much, and this is signs that your body's in a position where it might start stripping off its own muscle mass. You might also have noticed a crash in your metabolism, which is just a descriptive term, but essentially when you do accumulate too much fatigue, your metabolic rate can decline massively. So you might even notice that you stop making fat loss progress. So essentially what I'm getting at is, yes, we have to work hard on prep, but there's a point where fatigue is too high and you're too flat and strength is too bad that you potentially are in for losing too much muscle mass, and obviously we don't want to lose any muscle mass, and then you might not even see any fat loss results in this period of time because fatigue is that high. There's a point of diminishing returns. Now, you need to understand when to identify this and communicate with your coach, because those people out there who have fed you this idea that prep is near impossible and should be traumatizing and you should be near death the entire time, one, they sold you a false idea, but two, this also is something that can be regulated and essentially preemptively aided just through simple communication, and especially if your coach has good fatigue management protocols in place. We essentially need to be good at communicating with said coach in order to help them do their job, to help you have an easier time, maintain as much muscle mass as possible, stay on track with making the progress in terms of fat loss that you should, and ultimately psychologically having the easiest time possible, which you don't, by the way, get a badge of honor for having the hardest time possible. It hopefully, in theory, should be as easy as possible relative to it still being a challenge. So anyway, without further ado, we have to understand when to communicate with your coach. And if you've never prepped before, this will be something you struggle with. And I'm telling you this now because everybody struggles with it. There will be a point, or several points, but especially the first one, you've never experienced this before, where fatigue is so high that your strength plummets all of a sudden, where your motivation or desire to train or do cardio all of a sudden plummets as well. You notice you yourself feel extremely flat. All of these things combined, once you reach a point where essentially in your head you are debating, am I just being a wet lettuce here or should I communicate with my coach? When you have that debate in your mind, that's the point you tell your coach, because being like that is unsustainable. And that, or those I should say, are signs that essentially you're in for losing muscle mass, not making fat loss progress that you should make because fatigue is too high, and ultimately, as I said, psychologically it's extremely unsustainable. The likelihood of you reaching the finishing line is very, very low when you're in this state. So it has to go managed along the way. And if you communicate with your coach and your coach has intelligent fatigue management protocols in mind, they can deploy them, sort you out, make sure that you get back on track, you bring about the right physique, you have as much of an easy time as possible, although easy isn't always the best word to describe a prep, have as much of an easy time as possible relative to what is the usual standard. They can make sure that they land the plane safely, you actually turn up on the day looking your best. So learn to communicate with your coach, and my best piece of advice is don't be a hero. Nobody gets a badge, and the judges certainly don't care about how much you suffered. They ultimately only care about how you look on the day.